and again, I don't know the percentages of this, that many manuscripts are simply turned down. There are trends in publishing. I don't think it applies only to Australia. Actually, in Australia, there is a very healthy independent sector in publishing, and independent bookshops, and a great book-buying public that supports festivals like this, and in Brisbane and Adelaide and so on. So that, you know, that's a very encouraging thing. But there are certainly trends. I mean, I'm getting fed up and walking into bookshops and just looking around for non-fiction and finding a wall of war in front of me. And the latest exploit from some ex-SAS person. I mean, they're often Australian books too. And okay, people have a right to have those and read them and so on and so forth, but I would have thought that this display in bookshops suggests that they are occupying the space of other books that haven't been accepted and haven't been published and perhaps aren't as commercial. But generally speaking, I don't think I'm equipped really to answer your question on that.
Okay, now we're just about out of time, but we have got room for two more questions. The gentleman down here, hang on, and then the gentleman up the back, and then we'll have to wind it up.
You were talking about mainstream journalists and the censorship via omission. I was just wondering what you thought of citizen journalism and things like blogging and the like in getting news out to people.
Yeah. Well, look, I have two thoughts there, main thoughts really. I think blogging is overrated. I have to say it. I look at some of the, you know, fair enough. I look at some of the comments at the end of some of my articles in the guide from the Guardian, whatever, and I think, you know, and I'm looking for real critical people who've taken it apart, and you know, there's just some fantastic idiots amongst them, you know. So I've come sort of contemptuous a bit of them. Sorry, you know, sort of. But you know, blogging has performed usefully in countries that have restrictions on the press. There's no doubt about that, although I hear from Anthony Lowenstein, who's written a book about it and had an article in today that most of those bloggers in China are actually support the government and are interested in consumer things and all that, and there's no real revolution going on there at all in blogging. But your point about citizen journalism is a very important one. And I don't call these people bloggers. They really are citizen journalists. And I edited a couple of years ago an anthology of investigative journalism, and I included in that an extraordinary citizen journalist called Jo Wilding, a woman who was happened to be inside Fallujah when it was attacked a couple of years ago, and reported without any of the embedded impositions on her. She didn't have a flak jacket, she didn't have any money, but she had the net. And they were among the best and rawest reporting of that kind I've read anywhere. So I put her against, in the company of great distinguished professional, if you like, journalists in that book. So, you know, one of the best reporters of Iraq is an American called Dar Jamal. Dar Jamal has reported from Iraq for the last 4 or 5 years. Most of his work has appeared on the net. Another one is a young Palestinian citizen reporter, although he's a journalist. He's called Mohammed Omar. His website is Rafah Today. He lives in Rafah in Gaza. And I was privileged enough to be able to give him and Dar Jamal a prize in London recently. His almost daily reporting of what's going on in Gaza is again some of the best reporting I've read. But in all those cases, it requires a discipline. And I would use the term professional, not as I used it in a sort of ironic sense before, but in a pure sense. They are journalists. They're not bloggers. Perhaps there's a crossover. I'm sure there is. So I think they're terribly important because they sail straight past the gatekeepers. That's what's so great about the internet. Straight past the gatekeepers, you know. But they take looking for you. You've got to be selective. Yeah.
Okay, one last question up the top here, and then we'll have to finish up.
John, this is Sasha Uzanov, freelance photojournalist. John, I was in Afghanistan 2 months ago shooting footage for Scott Taylor, a Canadian journalist, and the word that we were getting from the locals is that the Taliban need to be brought into negotiations rather than be demonised. But it's the US that are sort of holding back. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Oh yes, I think, well, that's right. Those reporters who have actually gone across from Pakistan and gone among the Taliban have found willingness to negotiate. There has to be negotiations. It can't go on forever. And I think even the government that was installed in Kabul will eventually want to negotiate to get some kind of preservation deal for itself. But at the moment, Afghanistan is being used to justify NATO. NATO is a completely anachronistic relic that should have gone with the end of the Cold War. It was quickly reinvented in order to bomb what was left of Yugoslavia, and it's been further reinvented to be a kind of policeman with no real mandate. It hasn't got any legal mandate at all. It's a bunch of the big guys wandering around looking after their interests. And I think that's one of the really big issues there, and the keeping of the Bagram base near Kabul. It's got nothing absolutely to do with democracy or the liberation of women or anything like that. It is about naked power. But the people who are running this war over there are in trouble. And that's why you see so much of the reporting of it is done through, I know in Britain, it's done through the British Army. And so we have the heroics of British soldiers night after night on television, and really what is happening to the civilian population of really no interest. But I think that Afghanistan is a disaster in the end. It's a killing machine, but I think people at home are becoming tired of that, and I think they're going to see through the good war. But it's something that ought not to be remote in Australia, because this is Kevin Rudd's favourite war, really, and it's probably Barack Obama's war. He's not giving us no war, he's giving us a choice of wars. As far as Australia goes, those of us who care about these things, I would keep an eye on the promotion of the good war. I read today that the Americans have announced that they're going to be withdrawing in 2011. Yeah, and I just ran my eye down. They're going to be withdrawing to the bases in Iraq. They have built something like 17 super fortresses, which they have no intention of leaving. So that's basically what happens in Afghanistan. They have these strategic bases and go back to them. So that's also worth keeping an eye on, as there's quite a few hundred Australians who are going to be part of this.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the session this evening. Just before we do close, just a reminder that John will be available in the foyer for a book signing. So all that's really left to us is to thank John for being so generous with both his thoughts and his time. Thank you.